Refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Sangha. Keeping the palms joined. Palms down. All right, good morning, everybody. Good morning. Thanks for showing up. Glad you're here. Anyone here for the first time? I guess you're here for the first time. What brings you here for the first time?
The Sangha.
The Sangha.
Community.
Say again?
Community.
Oh, wait. If we do it one more time, can you both say that at the exact same time? So I don't hear it again. That would be great. How about we'll go here first? David. All right. We won't hold that against you, I promise. We love him dearly. First time? Community, yeah. What does community mean to you? Sangha, community, same thing. What does that mean?
Belonging.
Yeah.
Giving.
And does this look like a group of people you want to belong to? You got the next hour to figure that out, and you'll probably run scared like all of us, you know? So welcome. Anyone else here for the first time want to share maybe why they're here, especially after all that? Those of you who keep coming back, well, why? Why do you keep coming back? And no jokes, let's stick to honest answers. Tom? Why do you keep coming back?
Because I love you.
I said no jokes, stick to honest answers.
That's not a joke.
What else? Yeah,
To sustain my practice.
to sustain your practice. It's hard out there, right? You mean just because since you've been coming here, the world out there hasn't done everything you wanted it to? Clearly, we're lacking. What else? Why show up?
I find it supportive, just the space and the people. It just feels, like supportive. It's easy when I'm out there just to kind of go off of practice or get busy with something else. But here it's kind of like, it's conducive.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, very often, and I hear that similar thing. Obviously, we all see it and hear it and think about it different ways, but in a sense that, a lot of us, whether it's with family or friends or other communities, other groups, other organizations we're part of, really looking deeply at the nature of one's mind, really looking deeply at the nature of one's actions, emotions, accountabilities, responsibilities. These aren't things that we tend to always bring into other areas of our lives, because in other places and other areas of our lives, we're always just so busy doing stuff. And when you come together in spaces like this, it's a time to sit and stop doing stuff, but actually start becoming aware of what's going on in your heart and what's going on in your mind. And then ultimately with practice, we begin to see, okay, well, what are we sitting with? What's in our heart? What's in our mind? And how do we then carry that into every aspect of our lives? All these other areas of our lives that are maybe not, and when I say not supportive of this, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're against it. But many other areas of our lives are not sitting around talking about the nature of our own suffering, or, the kindness and emotions that we lack. If you're coming in now, there are plenty of seats. Please, you don't have to go run to the back, so you can just fill in. There's chairs here, so come on in. Most of these people are friendly, so you'll be all right. But when we find, and again, the word Sangha, the word community, when we find communities, it's important to recognize that we have many communities in our lives, and they all function and operate differently. But if we continue to practice our own cultivation of wisdom and compassion as the Buddha taught, then those areas of our lives that we're involved in, those other communities that we're involved in, then maybe we respond differently in those communities. Anyone here have family members that push your buttons and drive you crazy? So that's one way, right, to recognize how a space like this or a practice like this, it really has nothing to do with this space specifically, but a practice like this, how it can really impact other areas and other communities in your life, specifically with family, which again tends to be a lot of, a lot of triggers. So again, if you are coming in now, there's plenty of seats, so feel free to fill in. All right, so with that, we'll start with the meditation practice. A couple things I'll tell you before we begin. And to those who are joining virtually, welcome. Glad you're here. Thanks for showing up. We do have a different system we're working on, so at the moment I'm not able to see comments, so if you put a comment on there and you're waiting for me to reply, stop waiting. So we'll get back to that later. A couple things I'll tell you before we begin. Nothing's going to happen to you. Right? You're not going to float away. You're not going to have any mystical, magical experiences. The mind that races all day long is not going to shut off. Don't judge your practice. Meaning, don't ask yourself, is this working or not working? Are you doing it right or wrong? We're just going to sit. We're going to breathe. You'll hear sounds inside the room, sounds outside. This is life. Life is filled with chaos. And this practice is learning to get quiet and still within all of the chaos. Posture, you just want to be comfortable. If you are on a cushion, often it helps slide into the front third, pushing the stomach forward, allows the back to straighten. If you're on a bench or chair, however you're seated, also just trying to sit up straight if comfortable, relaxing shoulders, hands around the knees or lap, whatever's comfortable. I will guide us as we begin, and we'll settle into a little bit of silence. Most important with this practice, do not expect anything. We're just going to sit and breathe. And starting with the eyes closed if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth is open or closed. We'll start with taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And eventually, settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. Start with gently guiding the attention, focus to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply continue this practice, observing sensation of breath. As the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it. Release that thought. Return attention, focus to the breath. Breathing in, follow breath in. Breathing out, follow breath out. letting go of expectations, letting go of judgments from the practice, just sitting, breathing. Learning to be comfortable in stillness, in quiet, wanting nothing but to sit and breathe. body still, rested, and the speech quiet, aware of all sounds. And the mind learning to settle. Know what it's like to just sit and breathe. Knowing with each breath, there's nothing else to do. Nowhere else to go. And no one else to be. Everything beautiful, exactly as it is. Sitting, breathing. Once again, taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And when ready, slowly opening the eyes, slowly beginning to move. And most important, with the practice of meditation, is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you'd prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize however you feel now, if it's quiet, calm, and still, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment, has nothing to do with anything I said. It's nothing to do with how we sit, hold the hands, or cross the legs. It's nothing to do with the sounds around us, or anything else for that matter. It's everything to do with your own mind, and your own mind's reaction to an external condition. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samuppada, means dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awaken. He was a human being, no different than any one of us, who began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. What that means, very simply, for all of us, regardless of where you come from or what you believe in or where you think you're going, your whole life is filled with things that happen. You react. More stuff happens. More reactions. That's it. That's what we get. This practice is simply learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, still. Because for most of us, the way you responded to the last 20 minutes is quite different from how you respond to every other 20-minute period of your life. And so all we're working on is closing the gap to where the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful, whatever that means to you in your respective lives. But with a mind that's steady, clear, focused, distracted by nothing, disturbed by no one. It's not an easy practice. It's not necessarily fun. It's not an escape, as often people think it is. If your life is a crazy, hectic, stressed out mess, meditation doesn't fix that. It helps you become aware of why your life is a crazy, hectic, stressed out mess so you can then actually make changes in your life. Meditation is direct perception into the present moment. And very often that present moment is filled with chaos, difficulty, conflict. And so we're learning to be with that as it arises. Because chaos, difficulty, conflict will continue to arise the rest of your life. It's the first thing the Buddha said. Life is filled with suffering, discomfort, angst, dissatisfaction. If for some reason people want to deny that and try to just skip through all that stuff. Meditation is free. Buddhist practice is free. It's just sitting, breathing, learning to be kind to yourself and everybody else you encounter every moment of your life. And that's it. Once we stop trying to change, fix, control, manipulate everything and everyone around us, which is where we spend so much of our time, hoping they do this, hoping they do that, wishing they would do this, wishing they would do that. Why did this happen? Why did that happen? We spend so much time and energy on things outside of ourselves. This practice is learning to gain an awareness and some sense of control over what we think, what we say, and what we do. And if you can do that, then there's a very good chance your life will change. Your emotions will shift. You'll start to enjoy things more often instead of this constant struggle that everybody seems to be in. And in reality, the struggle exists in one place and one place only, and that's in your mind. Sitting and breathing is just sitting and breathing. Buddhist teachings on right concentration, looking at part of the Eightfold Path, which comes from the Four Noble Truths. The first thing the Buddha said is life is filled with dukkha, suffering, discomfort, angst, dissatisfaction. The second thing he says is there's the cause, often referred to as the three poisons: greed, anger, ignorance, cravings, attachments, desires, all those other things that cause our suffering. The third one is the ending of it: nirvana, liberation, cessation from suffering. And the path is the Eightfold Path. Having right views, thoughts, speech, action, livelihood, effort, mindfulness, concentration. All of that's on Google for free. So just stay to the first 2 pages and you'll be all right. But looking at right concentration in relationship to what I was just speaking to is having the ability to concentrate and focus on the present moment keeps us in the present moment. So much of the pain and suffering we experience and feel in our hearts and our minds is because our mind, our attention, our focus is not present. It's wrapped up in the past. It's worried about the future. Everything we're sad and angry, depressed about that happened our entire lives up to this moment. Then we jump to the future and there's all the stress, anxiety, fear, worry. So very rarely are we actually in the present moment. So unless you hate sitting here right now at this moment, in this moment, if you concentrate and stay present in this moment, there's nothing wrong. And how often do we do that? Very rarely. So it's important to understand where the nature of suffering, the cause of your suffering, where it comes from. It's your mind. So, good luck. With that, I'll pause. For me, I really just prefer to respond to questions, meditation, Buddhist practice. And we'll use the rest of our brief time this morning for questions. So open up anything, meditation, Buddhist practice. We'll go from there.
Often hear in Buddhism about being becoming detached. Could you say what that means, really detached?
Yeah, so the question around, you often hear in Buddhism about being detached. I'm glad you phrased it that way because hearing detached is one of the most, next to people's lack of understanding of what the word Zen means and lack of understanding of what karma actually is. Detached, I think, is a very unhealthy way that many people often speak about the practice of what's called non-attachment. Detach, again, we're looking at language here, but from having discussed this enough and thought about it and pondered it, detach very often means like a severing, a cutting off from. And non-attachment is actually the opposite of that. You're not cutting off. Somebody a while back once said that it was I'll leave names out to protect the innocent and the religion, but it was a religious university that, as they often do, came here during their comparative religious studies, and so I sat with them and did a talk and opened up to Q&A, and they said that their teacher at this religious university told them that because Buddhists practice detachment, that means you can't love your mother. So you can imagine how much fun I had with that, having a Jewish mother, and if you didn't love your mother, I wouldn't even be able to exist anymore. It's kind of a requirement, I think. But so it's not detaching as if you don't care. Non-attachment ultimately is love, like complete, absolute, boundless, endless love, understanding, respect. But without control, manipulation, right? When we practice non-attachment, what it means, in my understanding, is we are seeing things for how they are. And we're not attaching to our views of how we want them to be. Because there is life as it arises. There's life as it's arose in the past. And there's life how it will arise in the future. And then there's life how it actually is. And what we often are attached to is our judgments, opinions, expectations, critiques of how we wanted things to go, how we want things to go, and how we hope things will go. So we're very attached to this story. And non-attachment means we're just embracing life in all its beauty and all its pain. And same thing with, that makes sense so far? When we look at family, friends, loved ones, right? Coming back to that example, what it means is we're going to love people for who and how they are, not who and how we want them to be. So non-attachment is loving them for how they are, which is just how they are. Right? I hate to break it to you, but none of us in this room are perfect. We make mistakes. We cause harm. We say things we shouldn't say. We do things we shouldn't do. This is life. And you know what that means? So do others. If for some reason we've spent a majority of our life doing things, saying things that we shouldn't possibly have done, I mean, I don't want to speak for any of you, so I'll just speak for myself. Right? And when we do those things, does it help to have people hate you and be angry at you and judge you and critique you and attach to their views of how they think you should be? Or does it help to have them just love you unconditionally and not attach to how you are? It doesn't mean what we said or did is right. It doesn't mean it wasn't harmful or painful. But non-attachment means we're going to love people regardless of how we expect them to be. And practicing non-attachment, as any of these teachings, really all of these teachings, will drastically shift how you respond to people in your life. Because most people have an idea of how they want people to be. And most people have an idea of how they want themselves to be. So practicing non-attachment with yourself, which is funny because the self doesn't exist anyways, but so let's practice non-attachment with the self that is not there. And you're good. Yeah. But I'll just kind of as a little word of caution, when you hear people share these teachings in this practice, if they talk about detached, I would really, to me, that's kind of a red flag of maybe not coming from the right place around that practice. Yeah. What else?
You just said the self doesn't exist. I'd like to know what you mean by that and how you came to that conclusion.
Who just said it?
You.
Who is me?
I'm not here to play games with you.
Well, I'm not playing games with you either. I'm being very serious. Who am I?
Goodbye.
No, I'm being very serious. Okay.
I was going to ask the same question.
Yeah, sir, what's your name?
John Paul.
John Paul, come on, let's play. Come here. This is my serious answer. This is probably your first time here.
I
Yeah?
don't think you are being serious.
No, I very much am.
Then you're welcome to answer.
Okay, so here's my response to you. What Buddhists said about the self is that we exist physically, but our perception of who we are and our perception of others is not ultimate truth. So my response to you of who am I, to me, while you might have perceived that as being joking, in essence, to me, is the most wise way and honest way to respond to the question. And what I'm getting at is you, along with everybody else in here, has a perception of me. I was given a name when I was born. That name is Jeff. Is Jeff who I am? In this moment, I'm sitting here talking to you. So is who I am right now talking to you who I am, right? However many hours or minutes or days or years ago, I did a bunch of stuff I shouldn't have done. Is that person who I am? Maybe later today I'll do something kind. Maybe later today I'll do something that harms someone. Is that who I am? So what the Buddhist teachings around non-self was really, I believe, in my unenlightened view, getting at was to help us understand that we have a perception of ourselves and everybody else. And that perception isn't ultimate truth. That is simply our perception of someone. And the danger is we roam around. Anyone ever been mad at someone? Right? So you've been mad at someone. is the thing that you're angry about, this person, I don't need details, right? The less I know, the better. But just as an example, is the thing that you're angry about with this person, is this who they are? Or is this just something that occurred and something they did?
I don't know. I think the anger has something to do with the subject-object relationship, but and this sort of belief of separateness. But
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's better than I could have said it,
Yeah.
right? So every experience in our lives is that. We have interactions with people. And sometimes they work, and sometimes they don't. But to label that as who someone is. Now, I want to be very careful around these teachings of non-self because, as I started to say at the beginning, it doesn't mean we don't exist. We exist. But we exist completely differently from how we perceive ourselves. The Buddhist teachings around emptiness addresses this exactly. And to my point, when the Buddha asked one of his disciples, Subhuti, to give a teaching on ultimate wisdom, on emptiness, what Subhuti said was nothing. And the Buddha said, good job. Good job at explaining emptiness. Good job at explaining ultimate wisdom. Because it is beyond words. So for you to say to me, to ask that question, me to say to you, who am I? I'm not making fun of you. I'm not picking on you. I'm not trying to tease you or humiliate you or embarrass you. I'm asking you who's someone who I don't think I've ever seen before, for you to tell me who I am. Because then if I turn to each and every one of you to define or describe who I am, you're all going to say things differently. And none of them are who I am. They're just perceptions. Yeah.
If you tell somebody good job, isn't that you perceiving them to be meeting some sort of criteria that you've set?
Yes. It is. Yes. Confusion is a big part of this practice. And I mean that very seriously. The challenge is, so Thich Nhat Hanh, the recent Vietnamese Zen master, you're familiar with Thich Nhat Hanh, right? His teaching, I don't know if you heard me say this, but he gave, to me, one of the most beautiful teachings I've ever seen. You can YouTube it, it's titled What is Nirvana? And it's like 6 minutes and 42 seconds or something like that. And he says nirvana, liberation from suffering, freedom from suffering, is freedom from views. Right? So that to me helped me understand that I have views. These views are not necessarily going to go away. I don't anticipate the rest of my life having no views. They'll change, they'll shift, they'll adjust. The danger isn't so much in our views. And by danger, what I mean is the harm, or potential harm, is that we roam around all day thinking our views are what? And so why I say confusion is important, because this practice is about opening up to the fact that maybe, just maybe, all of our views that we have and we've held our whole life, maybe they're not correct. But man, are we stuck on them. We get so wrapped up in our views, and in our anger, and in our frustration, and in our effort and ability to try to prove that we are right. Very often, I don't know about any of you, but I know I spent years arguing with people, and even in the moment of that argument, when I realized, uh-oh, I'm wrong, right? My ego didn't want to tell them I was wrong, because then I'd have to admit I was wrong, so then I just stayed in the argument, just to see if I could win the argument. Because then in my crazy head, I was like, okay, I won the argument. I'm wrong, but at least I won the argument. Now again, I'm sure none of you do that. I'm sure the moment you've recognized that you were potentially wrong in a conflict, and yes, wrong is a view. So back to this confusion, it's to understand that maybe our views are not correct. And maybe they are. But can we at least open up to the remote possibility that there's a whole world of views out there. And the world doesn't operate around yours. But because we attach to our view and we think, I am right, therefore we suffer. So, yeah.
So I'm reading a book by, is it pronounced Thich Nhat Hanh?
Thich
Nhat Hanh.
Again, this is my interpretation of a
Yeah.
Vietnamese name, so
But
yeah.
we're talking about the same
Yeah,
thing.
yes.
So So I'm reading a book, and the conclusion, the paradox, I love these paradoxes, but there's this great quote, and I hope I'm quoting it right, but the quote, he's quoting the Buddha. So I'd be interested in your perspective on this, because I try to practice this idea in my regular life out in this temple. The quote goes, "The dharma of my practice is non-practice." So being a doer, I thought, okay, I'm wondering, what is this going to be like if I go about my busy day and I'm doing things, but at the same time I'm not doing them? And the interesting sensation I had was sometimes I feel a little bit like, now I've got to do this, I've got to do that. But because even though I'm doing something, what if I'm really not doing it? Then it gets done, but I'm not having all of this baggage of, I gotta get this done, I gotta get that. Does that make sense?
I mean, in a massive state of confusion way, yes. But so this is the Zen practice.
Yeah.
So Thich Nhat Hanh, he is the Zen master of all Zen masters, right? And you know, for those who aren't familiar with him, did a lot of work around social justice with Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King nominated him for a Nobel Peace Prize. For those locally, maybe know Deer Park Monastery or Plum Village in France. But the work of Thich Nhat Hanh and his teachings are incredibly profound and considered, he passed just 2 years ago, you know, one of the most modern day present enlightened folks that we've had the incredible opportunity to be able to watch on YouTube, right? Yeah.
But that quote really bothered me for a while.
Yeah.
This makes no sense. My dharma, practice is non-practice.
Yes.
And I was like, well, maybe it's like, and even in meditation, it's almost like the less I try, the better it is. So I'm trying not to do meditation. Am I?
Yes.
Doing?
It's the doing of, so you can phrase this a lot of different ways, but the doing of non-doing, right? The reason I introduced Thich Nhat Hanh was to give it some context for those who maybe aren't familiar with him, but to understand, as a Zen practitioner, right, this school of Zen Buddhism coming from Mahayana, specifically, right, which about 500 years after the Buddha died, developed and flourished into China, Japan, Korea, Northern Asia. And you have Mahayana Buddhism, which is based in many sutras, but a couple of the main ones are the Diamond Sutra and the Heart Sutra. All of these teachings are around non-duality. And that we suffer, we struggle, we're challenged because of a dualistic mind. The Heart Sutra, again, another thing that I recommend, especially since you're fascinated with this topic, that you read, and it will confuse you as much as you're already confused. But the Heart Sutra, which is one of the most commonly recited Buddhist sutras around the world, so as I mentioned earlier, first introduction to Buddhist teachings is suffering, causes suffering, end of suffering, and the path, right? Heart Sutra says, there is no suffering. There is no cause of suffering. There is no cessation of suffering. And there is no path. There is no wisdom or any attainment. With nothing to attain, Bodhisattva, as enlightened means, attain Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi, supreme ultimate enlightenment. With nothing to attain, supreme ultimate enlightenment is attained. So what you're referencing in the Thich Nhat Hanh teaching, to me specifically, is coming from the Heart Sutra, which would make sense. Again,
it makes me think of like physics, like the way light moves, unless it's observed it acts in one way, but it's not acts as another way, but like what's the power of observation? Understood.
And so I think I would introduce or suggest two things. One, it's actually similar. We were talking about, it's fun to explore this stuff intellectually. And it'll also just confuse you completely, right? Which is great.
Yeah.
But the other side is, okay, so then how can I practically, to me that's the most important thing in Buddhist teachings, if anything. If we can't logically, practically put it into our lives, then other than just some intellectual fascination, how beneficial is it? So to practice this in our lives, you gave kind of a good example of the meditation, but how can you go through your day and do things without being attached to the outcome?
Well, that's what I mean to think about. Like when I'm making my bed, I'm like, I'm not really making my bed. I'm just making my bed.
Yeah,
Like, I just tell myself, I'm not really doing anything, I'm just making my bed. I
But-
know it's weird.
no, it's not weird. What I'm suggesting is, instead of telling yourself you're making the bed or you're not making the bed, just make the bed
Yeah. Without any of that.
without defining it. Does that make sense?
Not, yeah.
Yeah. Enough for now.
It'll be interesting.
Yeah.
To practice.
Yeah. Beyond attachment or definition. Yes, we'll go here and then, yeah.
Isn't another way of maybe talking about or exploring it being present, being really perfectly present, not feeling the sheep when you're making the bed, or being with that person and not releasing expectations of them, and saying that yes and to that moment, to that person, to the place, to the socks,
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think that, and again, as all great Zen teachers and masters like Thich Nhat Hanh, it's where you often see the metaphors, the examples of drinking tea and eating, right? When you're drinking tea, just drink tea. When we're eating, just eat. What do we often do when we're eating? Oh, I like it, I don't like it, we talk about it, we're explaining it, we're describing it. Right, just eat. So it is just about being present with what's occurring. Yeah. Sean?
I was saying, how do I practice non-attachment to someone I love that's killing themselves?
What was the last part? How do you practice non-attachment to someone you love that's what?
That's like slowly killing themselves.
Yeah, I mean,
Like I feel like I'm detaching because of the pain, to just even try to talk to them and be not attached to,
yeah. So the question was, how do you, just to repeat it for those virtual, how do you practice non-attachment with someone you love that is slowly killing themselves? That's your, yeah. A couple things here is that regardless of how I respond to this, it's not necessarily, you're not going to walk out and be like, okay, cool, now I know how to do this, right? It's not easy. So to talk about non-attachment, to talk about loving people unconditionally, we can talk about it all day long, read all the self-help and therapy stuff all day long. And then there's the doing of it. So I just want to say that. I'm setting the expectation that regardless of what my response is, it's not going to be an easy practice. But what I suggest is understanding the practice of karma. Karma literally means action. Each individual has their own karma. Each individual is on their own path. And so the practice is, as I'm sure we all have had people in our lives do things, or we've observed things, that we would look at and say, this is beneficial for them. We would look at and say, this is harmful for them. And so it's painful when we see people we love who are suffering. Absolutely. Have you ever had people watch you, Sean, suffer? And have you had them tell you what you should do? And have you listened? No. Now you're lying. This is not the honesty morality class this morning, but let me rephrase that question. Have you done things that cause suffering? Have you had people tell you you're doing things that are suffering, and have you changed?
Yeah. Oh, sorry, no.
No. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but my point is,
Like when it's killing me,
but that's your view of your situation. My understanding of ultimate truth of this situation is not going to be something you're going to like or want to hear. But the reality is, every individual, right? I've been working in recovery communities, people who've been victims of trauma, abuse, sexual assault, you name it, everything, for 25 years, right? Everybody is on their own journey. And that is not easy to watch. But they are making their own choices. And the reason I started with you is that you have made choices in your life that haven't been healthy. I've known you long enough to know that. And there have been people who loved you and cared about you who've said, hey, Sean, you should stop making these choices. And you heard them, and you knew they were right. You ever seen the movie Trainspotting? No. Okay, well, the next moment, exactly what you knew you shouldn't be doing, in the next scene, you were doing it. It's not easy to break habits and patterns and addictions and ways of life that are unhealthy. And so compassion says, I'm going to love them regardless. And yes, they are killing themselves. I've seen it. I've watched it. Many of us have seen it and watched it in those we love. And we can't always fix them. But you have two choices, many extremes here, but two choices. One is to be angry at who and how they are, or the choices they're making, I should say. And then, on top of them making choices that you're watching them kill themselves, now you're angry at them. And then you're angry at yourself because you feel like it's your fault. Anyone ever watched people make choices that's killing themselves and felt like it's your fault? Right? They're making their choices. And non-attachment says, I'm going to love them regardless. And this is not an easy practice. But the reality is, nobody makes choices for us. They tell us things. They guide us. They advise us. Right? But they're on their own. And the practice is to recognize, I'll close with this thought. I spend 15 years twice a week telling people, think good thoughts, speak good words, do good deeds. How many of you have listened to that every moment of your lives? And the moment you walk outside these doors, you're on your own. It's your choice. You make those choices. Our friends and loved ones make those choices. And it hurts. And it's painful. This is life. Life hurts. Life is painful. And life is also filled with tremendous beauty and joy and happiness. And this is this thing that we live in. So, with that I'll close. We'll join palms. May any merit gained from this practice be transferred to all beings in all directions. May all beings be at peace. May all be free from suffering. May any merit gained from this practice be transferred to those who need it most. All right, a few quick announcements before you all head out. Thanks for being here. My name is Jeff. I'm a Dharma bum. We opened up this temple 17 years ago to introduce Buddhist practice to those who show up. Those of us who leave, we're not monks, we're not nuns, we're not gurus, we're not masters, we're not teachers. We're just unenlightened folks doing our best to take our understanding of Buddhist teachings and put it into terms that hopefully make sense to those who show up. Every night we have classes led by different people. From different Buddhist backgrounds, different traditions. Every Thursday at 4:30 we do, I still think, one of the best things around here. It's a food redistribution program where we prepare gourmet vegetarian meals, also known as peanut butter and jelly, and we feed people who sleep on the street. So anytime you think your life sucks and you really lack gratitude for all that you have in your life, feed people who put their head on a sidewalk every night. It tends to put things into perspective. Again, that's every Thursday at 4:30. First Saturday of the month, we have a half day of silence retreat, so 20 minutes of silence is absolute torture, and I strongly recommend doing it for 4 hours. It makes everything that much easier after that. So as I said earlier, everything we do is free. You just show up. Other than that, I don't think anything out of the ordinary. Buddha for You is there if you need it. As always, we have no cleaning crew. We are it. So if you want to help, stick around, help out in the garden, or there's a couple lists inside the bathroom doors of things you can do around temple to help clean. That's always appreciated. So thank you all for being here. I wish you well. We'll see you soon.